Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. The F1 schedule is heating up. Will you go with the reliable and Max Verstappen, or take your chance with a potential surprise? Download the app in Ontario. Use the QR code you see at the bottom of your screen somewhere, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. Welcome to Nailing the Apex. I'm Tim Hauraney. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Write reviews. It really helps us grow the show. You can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. And joining me today from Fangraphs, it's Michael Bauman. Michael, what's going on, dude?
Nothing much. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been a while. Actually, well, it hasn't been that long, has it? It's been a month.
Yeah.
A month?
Yeah. I don't know. You've talked to other people since then. I'll forgive you.
But I text you quite. We text.
Yeah.
Often.
Always in touch.
Lewis Hamilton. So let's get right into it. Thursday, media day, come to a close for the Monaco Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton contract talks. Obviously on this show, we talked about it for the past week, and a big portion of it was the article that came out of the Daily Mail last Sunday, I believe it was, Sunday evening, and the fact that it stated Hamilton was going to be offered a £40 million, so 50 million USD contract from Ferrari. It even made mention in there, Bauman, like that Ferrari president, like John Elkann, was going to be making the offer. Yeah. It's like, where's this article coming from? Like, it's absolutely outrageous at some points, but Hamilton today obviously confirmed that he is working closely, his team is working closely with Toto Wolff, Mercedes boss Toto Wolff, to get a deal done, and something should be on the horizon with them fairly soon. Obviously, Ferrari's Frederic Vasseur, he also denied the report as well. I mean, what do you think about this story? I mean, like, obviously people get bored when there's no racing going on, but man...
Yeah, the first thing I thought was, man, it's good to have the rumor mill back, because
that's a big rumor.
Like at the top of the grid, all these guys are locked in for multiple years, except for Hamilton, who's been very comfortable to sort of roll on 1 or 2 years at a time at Mercedes. But also, when this was coming out, I just didn't understand what the angle was for really anybody, because bringing Hamilton in would either upset Charles Leclerc or upset that balance of the team being built around him, or maybe be a precursor to him leaving, because his contract's up at the end of next year. And I didn't get the angle for Hamilton, because I would understand if Mercedes they're kind of spinning their wheels right now. He's running out of time. He very, very badly seems to want the 8th driver's title that eluded him in 2021. And I would totally understand him, even after 10 years with that, with Mercedes and being brought through McLaren when McLaren was the Mercedes Works team, him leaving that relationship behind in a chance to get one last ring, but I don't know that Ferrari is in any better shape than Mercedes is right now. They're also questioning their car concept. They're also just as far behind Red Bull as Mercedes is right now. It doesn't seem like there's any other option with the kind of upside that would make sense to me to tempt Hamilton away from Mercedes. So it makes sense that both Ferrari and Hamilton have sort of poo-pooed this rumor now that they've finally had a chance to be asked about it, because I never really got the angle. It would make sense if there is actually any smoke to this, that this would be the kind of thing that would come from the Ferrari senior management, and not from anybody within the racing team.
And I wouldn't, if I were Lewis Hamilton, I wouldn't go just to Ferrari for the sake of having more money. I mean, like you just said, the car concept for them is not really there right now. I mean, it's there over one lap, but it's not there for a full race distance. I mean, obviously Mercedes isn't there either, but if we look at the two operations, Mercedes is a fully fit championship winning team, and they've only done a little bit of tinkering with the internals of that team over the last few months. And outside of that, this is still going to be a team, I think, that is going to make this comeback, whether it's late this season or into next. They're going to figure this out very quickly, even though they do have to right the ship quite fast. I mean, they are bringing upgrades for this weekend. The upgrades they will be introducing are new side pods, floor, new front suspension, rear suspension. Not quite sure. Haven't seen the images yet. They've kind of kept that hidden.
Have you seen the side pods? I've seen some of the...
Yeah. I mean, I think, like...
It's heartbreaking, man. I know the old ones didn't work, but I did like the... the same thing with the first Aston Martin concept from last year, that there was so much visual variation between these cars. It was a lot of fun. And I thought that the Aston last year and the Mercedes with the zero side pod concept were, like, very cool looking cars, and it turns out they just weren't very fast, so they had to get junked, and now everything sort of looks Red Bully. But yeah, finish what you're
well, but the problem is with this, like when I look at just the side pod concept, like as a whole, I mean, I think like the biggest issue that they're facing with trying to turn this thing around quickly is that side impact structure that they have, which is new. It was introduced a few seasons ago, or coming into 2022, if I remember correctly, or maybe it was 2021. I can't remember. It was one or the other. But anyways, it's a portion of the side pod that, like, basically they've built it where it comes outside of the side pod instead of what other teams are doing. They have it built within the entire tub of the car. Instead, this comes out of the tub. And I think one of the huge issues with, like, their side pod configuration and what they've brought, which was supposed to be for Imola, but obviously they have to do it in Monaco. I think that affects, like, a lot of the things with this car, and that's not something that you can quickly replace or build because of the spend, the amount of money that's going to cost them. I mean, that's definitely an off-season project for them. So it just kind of feels like they're, like, gluing bits on, and let's see if this kind of works. And I don't want to call it a Frankenstein car, but it's like, we have little parts here, but like they don't really have much downwash into those side pods either. I mean, if you look at the Aston Martin, they have these huge gullies, right? Same with Red Bull. Good big gullies going back to the diffuser and the beam wing. So I don't know, man. It is going to be a difficult thing for them to turn around, but I think if any team's going to do it, it's going to be them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the kind of thing you can fix in season. It's sort of a I don't know if it's a macro or micro version of what McLaren's going through, where they sort of realize that they need to junk everything and start over. Too late to do that for this season. But it's not just a matter of changing out the side pods. It's a whole unified design that was a completely different direction than everybody else. Like if they're going to go in the Red Bull direction, like that doesn't start with the side pods. That starts with the suspension. Mm-hmm. And like you said, that's an off-season project. Based on some of the incredible engineering that they've done in the past, I understand why you'd be optimistic about their ability to claw back this advantage, but I am skeptical. I think that if there was another option, I think it would be wise for Lewis Hamilton to explore it, but because Mercedes' ability to build the fastest car on the grid basically 8 years running was based on two things that they don't really have anymore. One was that they got such a huge head start on everybody else at the start of the V6 turbo hybrid era that advantage carried through all the way basically until 2019 when Ferrari made a illegal similarly powerful engine, and really in 2021 when Honda finally caught up with the Red Bull. And they don't have that advantage to work with anymore. And the other thing is they had a huge economic and resource advantage, which is now neutered because of the cost cap. So I don't think it's just a matter of just, they'll fix it because James Allison's back working hands-on with the team every day. Like, I think that they still have to prove that they can not only keep up with Red Bull in terms of development, but they have to make so much more progress because they're starting from so far behind. And Red Bull not only came out of the gates with the fastest car, they've been developing it better. And, you don't just have to make incremental gains, you have to reverse a current trend. And that's why I hope Mercedes comes back and gets Lewis Hamilton a championship contending car before he ages out of the sport, but I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, definitely be tough. I mean, if we look at it, this thing could possibly be 2, maybe 3 years away, and we are still not certain how Red Bull's sporting penalty is going to affect them. Has it already affected them? And if so, they've you don't really see it, or is it going to be something that is going to affect them for next season's car, where they've just front loaded everything? They've made a badass car getting out of the gates, and will everybody start to claw them back, and including in that Mercedes? But again, you so eloquently put it, I mean, they've got a giant ship to kind of turn around here and go in different directions. So who succeeds here at Monaco? I mean, with when we take a look at Mercedes bringing this upgrade, I mean, this isn't the ideal place for a team to bring an upgrade to. It is unfortunate of the circumstances that set everything back in Imola, and everything that's going on there. Those poor people, a lot of people losing their homes and stuff, and not having that race going forward. And for Mercedes, they actually had the upgrade there, and then they had to ship it to Monaco from Imola. And so if you look at it from a financial aspect, it just would have cost way too much money to send the old car to Monaco and run it. So they've had to revert to using this upgrade. But I don't know, man. This isn't a great place to use it, because one of them crashes. They don't really have like a ton of spare parts to really slap this thing together, and you're not really getting a lot of data from the car either, because you don't have fast corners here, and the aero data you're going to get is not going to be the greatest.
I don't think it can, it doesn't hurt to bring the new version of the car. It's not like you'll learn nothing driving it in Monaco, but the danger of running out of spares, like they would probably have been running down their stockpile of spare parts for the old package, and so they might be running low on the old specs, side pods or wings or whatever they're bringing, the old floor, and the walls are closer in Monaco than they are anywhere else. So it's a dangerous place to drive no matter what. I think it's just you do the best you can here, and then you figure out, like the Barcelona, as much as I don't really enjoy watching the racing there, like that seems to be the best test track. And so you'll get all the data you need when they go to Spain. And so you just gut it out in Monaco and get to work in earnest next time around.
And the thing with Monaco is, I mean, it's such a different type of racetrack. It's slow. There are no really long straightaways, like you had mentioned. A lot of walls. I think Red Bull is one of those teams who are going to struggle this weekend at this track, only because a lot of the things that make the team strong and the advantages that they do have with certain types of tracks, this is not one of them. And so this doesn't really suit the strengths of their car. I mean, I think just for them, it's difficult for just to get the tire in the right operating window, just to set a really good qualifying lap. I mean, the car is great in the race, but over a quali distance, it takes them a while. So I don't particularly think they're going to be strong here, man. I really don't.
No, I think this is a track that's going to play against them, but there are a couple of reasons to suspect that they'll probably win anyway. One of them is it's just the fastest car all around, whether or not the areas where it's strongest, passing with the DRS, the high-speed corner performance is sort of nullified here. The other thing is they've got the last two winners, and, Sergio Perez is somebody who raises his game on street circuits, and I think Max Verstappen is driving better than anybody else on the grid at this moment. So if this is a place where it's all about precision and all about the driver, and that's where I think a lot of the romance or the mythology comes around this track, that it's really a test of the best drivers. They have two of the best drivers for this circuit. And so I certainly think that this is probably the best chance for somebody, whether that's Fernando Alonso and an Aston Martin that would seem to have a lot of its disadvantages mitigated by the nature of this track, or Charles Leclerc, if he can keep it out of the wall for once here. One of those guys could pull out something special and break that Red Bull winning streak, but I wouldn't count on it. I would still expect, probably a Verstappen win and both Red Bulls on the podium.
You make a good mention there with Aston Martin and Ferrari. I mean, I really think they're going to be more competitive than Red Bull be this weekend. I mean, Ferrari in particular, he made a good point with Charles Leclerc. The guy's got zero luck.
He wants it so bad. I feel so bad for him, because it's not like he's making these mistakes because he's overdriving the car, because like nobody wants to win anywhere as badly as he wants to win here.
Well, he could have had a chance last season, Bauman, but the team blew it on the strategy.
Right, and by the way, like, that's, you want to talk about why Lewis Hamilton wouldn't go to Ferrari, like, man, he gets passive-aggressive on the radio. Could you imagine what he would do if that happened, if what happened to Leclerc last year happened to him?
Oh, man, it wouldn't go over well, that's for sure. I think for Ferrari, I mean, obviously, with the strategic play, get that out of the window. I think Charles Leclerc would have been on for the win that year at his home race. So, I don't know, man. If he wins this weekend, Monaco's going to go crazy. Yeah, it will. It just will, man. He's got his younger brother racing in Formula 2 this weekend as well. I mean, the place would go absolutely bonkers to see both of them get a win at their home track.
Are you calling incredible. It? You calling the Leclerc double in F1 and F2?
No, definitely not. Definitely not doing that. Ferrari will have some upgrades for this weekend. But again, I mean, this is a step in the direction for that team where, I mean, they've made it known that they're not going to be bringing big upgrades to the car. It's going to be a slower process of, bringing smaller upgrades to the car. This is something that Alpine did last season, and I think it's a smart move on Ferrari's part, just so they can get a better understanding of where they're at, because I still don't think they really even know, to be perfectly honest with you. And looking at this track could be something that suits them. I mean, who do you think's gonna win this thing? Because when we take a look at the race as a whole, it's really won on Saturday.
Yeah.
It just is. And, do we need a new qualifying format?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because I've been thinking about this a lot. It's not as hard to pass with the new cars here, or at least it wasn't last year as it was in years previous. But, this is the most thrilling qualifying run of the year, followed by a parade. And barring some changeable weather, barring some strategic blunder, and even then the consequences of that is limited at Monaco in a way that it's not at other tracks. Like, this is a procession, and 78 laps is a lot to watch for that. So this has led to some people saying, "Oh, we should take Monaco off the calendar. It's not fit for modern F1 cars." But I've been kicking around ideas, and one of my favorite of which, Elizabeth Blackstock wrote about at Jalopnik earlier this week. She was inspired by something Denny Hamlin said about NASCAR maybe adopting a bracket where you have two drivers pitted against each other for a playoff, and whoever finishes higher in the race between those two drivers advances. She suggested something like that for a qualifying event in Monaco, and I think that's, you make it all about the qualifying is the way that I think you go forward with Monaco. So, I know you're a cycling person, which you admonished me that you're not just a cycling person when a Canadian wins Paris-Roubaix Femme. But, that every cycling race has different formats, different challenges, and some of them are individual time trials. And I think it would be very cool to see just line up all 20 cars and give them one shot, and whoever gets the random draw for qualifying order, run them all one after another, get all those close-up shots of them going through the chicane, kissing the barrier with the front tires, Martin Brundle going nuts in the commentary booth for each one. And then, you line them up at the end of Saturday and pay out some kind of points, because I think it's important to have, the engineering and the driving element combined. And, whether you go full points for the time trial, or whether it's, 10, 9, 8, whatever, sprint or, the sprint amount of points, whatever. And then on Sunday, you put them all in some kind of smaller car that's easier to drive close and pass, whether that's, Elizabeth's article said spec Miatas, because that's the gag at Jalopnik. But whether it's that or like F3 cars, you put them all in Fiat 500s or something, and have them like do an exhibition race on Sunday, and no points, but like the winning driver gets $1 million or something like that. And that I think would reinvigorate the spectacle of racing in Monaco, and I think it would focus fans' attention on something that highlights the challenge while also retaining a lot of the drama. Because now it's just, like you said, it's all over on Sunday, or it's all over on Saturday, and you sit around. What has frustrated me about a lot of races so far this season is not just the predictability of a Red Bull winning and Fernando Alonso finishing third, which has happened 4 times in 5 races. It's that we get teased with stuff. Oh, Max Verstappen biffed his qualifying lap. Oh, there could be weather. There could be unexpected tire degradation. And it just doesn't happen. And you just sit around waiting for something to happen, and nothing does. That's just the most disappointing thing you can go through as a spectator. And so just narrowing that focus onto qualifying, raising the jeopardy, giving you one shot, and then coming back on Sunday and just doing something fun. I think F1 could be a little less self-serious sometimes, and having all these guys whiz around in go-karts or F3 cars or something could be a lot of fun. Could be a lot of and it would also answer the age-old question of who's fastest in equal machinery. I would really like to see that.
I like the idea. I like certain parts of it. I think you made a good point. I mean, the season so far, it hasn't been very good. Obviously because of the Red Bull advantage, but kudos to them. That's part of Formula One, and they made a kick-ass car.
Yeah, it's not their fault. They're the last people to blame.
Literally, dude.
You can get bored watching them win, but they've done their jobs. You can't have any issue with them building such a good car.
Adrian Newey and company have done an incredible job, and the sophistication on that car blows my brains. Yeah. But outside of that, if you take away Red Bull and you just focus on, the Aston Martins, the Ferraris, the Mercedes, that battle actually is pretty cool. And if that were a championship battle, that we would be in a very good season. We'd be in a great season if that was what we had to deal with, but we don't. So I like the idea for qualifying. I think you do something where you line everyone up in pit lane, and you go by championship order. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, on the Friday, you only get one practice session. That's it. You get 60 minutes, and you're done. Saturday, you get just qualifying. That's it. And how you run it, get everybody in pit lane, you go in championship order. So Verstappen starts first for his quali lap, get the prep lap, and then straight into one lap quali. That's it. That's how you set the grid, for Monaco. And then at the end of the day, they can't do this right now, but you got to make the cars smaller, and you got to make them a little bit lighter because they're way too big for Monaco.
It's so fresh, and it this is a problem I think with the direction of the sport in general is that what they're trying to do to attract engine manufacturers or OEMs or getting Honda back into the sport, for instance, is there has to be a focus on hybrid technology, and also the cars are getting bigger because of safety. And I'm not going to argue against having the big resilient carbon fiber tub and the halo and all that, which adds weight and makes the cars wider and heavier. But I don't want to see people dying in their Lotus 49s or whatever. But everything, just the mandates of the sport, and also the standardization of a lot of parts, of a lot of the rigidity of the rule book. There's not a whole lot of variation that's out there to be had. And so what I would like to see is something, personally, I think electric cars in terms of an environmental panacea are kind of a scam. Obviously, all things being equal, you want to have cleaner energy, and it's more efficient to get your energy at the source than to make it in your inline 4 in your Subaru. But there's a lot of concerns about mining. It makes the cars heavier, and it also takes away from the fact that you could build a very small, very powerful, very efficient internal combustion engine nowadays, and that's just not the engine formula that's allowed. So I would like to, in a perfect world, I would like to see the hybrid route be open, but also to maybe have like an emissions cap or a fuel efficiency cap. Like this is how much fuel you get to go through the race, and the part of the engine homologation is your car has to burn this clean, and otherwise it could just be anything, and that could lead to teams building smaller, more efficient engines that don't have this big bulky hybrid component. Well, Unfortunately,
I think
that's
part of that,
never going to happen. Like this is like what I would do if I were dictator of the world. But
I wouldn't say never going to happen. I mean, I honestly think that the 2026 engine regulation actually focuses a lot on what you're actually saying. I think the goal with that is obviously to try and make the engines a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, and then increase the electrical component. But can those things be made smaller? And then we still don't know what the biofuels are going to be like, the synthetic fuels that they're working on. Like we still don't know. I mean, if that turns out to be a big time game changer, I mean, could that change a bit of Formula One? I mean, sure, why not? Could that change the automotive market? Sure, why not? And so it's all up for a bit of interpretation when we get to 2026, but yeah, I don't see why they can't make the cars a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter when we get to that time point, because they just can. It just looks like we're heading. Well,
you set out to do it though, and like just the having an electrical component adds so much weight anyway, and then they set the target, and it just gets like a person, just gradually gets heavier and heavier as you make compromises, and that's. There's no countervailing force against that. And so I just think the cars are going to continue to get bigger and heavier regardless of what the intentions are, as long as they, have such strict regulations, as long as they have the cost cap, as long as they, insist on making hybrids a part of it. Because I think that's a big part of the marketing. You guys get the Honda commercial up there, where they go through, you can make motorcycles, but, can you race cars? Can you race cars, but can you win? Like the line is, can you win Formula One in a hybrid?
Okay.
And so that's a big part of it is they're saying we're advancing this green technology. And, the way Formula One did with gearbox technology in the 90s, or adaptive suspension, and all these breakthroughs that eventually filter into into consumer products. Not really sure that's happening. I think it's just reflecting we want to have hybrid, and that has advantages for the sport. I think that it leads to some interesting tactical options in terms of overtaking and different battery deployment modes, but it's it comes with a huge weight and cost and complexity factor. And if you want to know why these cars are too big to race at Monaco, like that's why.
I had this conversation, something similar, with a buddy of mine earlier this week, and we ended up like getting down to even talking about like DRS and like, do we really need DRS, right? And it's kind of like, well, I mean, yeah, but I honestly would love to see them. Since we're getting into this anyways, and we're going to talk about Aston Martin and Honda in a minute here. I think having another strategy or form of deployment instead of DRS would be much better for Formula One. I think like a push to pass like they have in IndyCar. I mean, it doesn't have to be what IndyCar does, but something similar to that, where maybe
I was just going to say, like, we're complaining about F1. Let's just follow IndyCar full time. Like, let's get back to these jokers when Mercedes and Ferrari get their act together. And in the meantime, we'll talk about IndyCar.
No, but seriously though, I think like they can definitely. I think that would also add another element to the show for sure, and on track. And you give them however many seconds or minutes or whatever. Like, you could do it in so many different ways. Where maybe that attack mode is essentially using a bigger part of the battery component, and maybe that's something that they could take a look at for 2026. Because I honestly think that would help a lot of things. Because even if you're looking at like an in-lap, for instance, let's say Verstappen has a 3, 4, 5 second lead, right? And you're in second place, and you need to try and claw into a bit of that gap before Max does his pit stop. So yeah, you just lay on the boost, or you push the pass or whatever you want. You give yourself an extra, you give yourself an extra 50 horsepower, 60 horsepower, whatever it is, whatever it will be. And that's going to help shrink that time gap. So then you're going to make things, okay, the race is going to be a little bit more interesting, right? You don't have to be within a second to make a pass, or you don't have to be, under a second to make a pass or whatever. You can use it on an outlap. Like, there's so many different ways to make that work. I just think that would be something that would be fascinating. Yeah. But, looking at the 2026 engine power unit regulations, but also taking a look at the works teams. There's 6 of them now on the grid, thanks to the Aston Martin and Honda deal that the news came out earlier this week on Wednesday or Tuesday. When did I get that? I think it was Tuesday I got it. I don't even remember.
It was the middle of the night. It was like...
Well, actually, I'd gotten it earlier, gotten the news earlier in the day. And
you got the embargo or the...
Yeah. I got like everything, and they're like, okay, you can't say anything. And I'm like, until this time. And I'm like, all right, cool. And then I got to do a bunch of interviews and stuff. It was cool. It was a great opportunity.
It was like, I remember it was either Monday or Tuesday because I was covering a baseball game, and I got home and checked Twitter. And I'm like, why are all the UK-based F1 journalists I follow awake at this hour? And it's because they were doing that big launch event in Japan, and it was like, but it was surprising. Like go to bed, guys. Like,
no way, man. I was up until I want to say midnight with that. I think it was around that.
Yeah, I mean, for it was a reasonable time for you, but like, Nate Saunders needs to get his sleep. Yeah,
I mean, for those guys, I mean, I think they were up a little earlier in the morning than what they wanted to be. So 6 works teams now on the grid for 2026. And then you've got 4 customer teams on the grid, which is Williams, McLaren, Haas, AlphaTauri. Just some updated news on the Aston Martin Honda deal. A couple notes on that, as I heard from team principal Mike Crack earlier today. He confirmed that the deal actually goes until 2030. And I think for them it's important, moving forward, Bauman, to have an OEM to work with. I mean, I think with these new 2026 regulations that are going to be coming in, I don't think it's going to be like earlier formulas. I think I think you need to have an OEM, and I think you need to have some of those people like on site as well, so you can build a competitive car and try and win championships. I honestly think that that's going to be the direction of this formula. I really do.
Yeah, and I mean, that's always been important, or at least it's been important for the past 30 years.
Well, if you look at like Red Bull, right? I mean, like Red Bull was competitive with Renault engines, and they were just building incredible
But they were the
cars.
De facto works team for most of the time that they were winning, because Renault got...
a little bit.
Renault got out of it.
Yeah, like Renault was, but then also Renault was also, they eventually started supplying engines elsewhere as well, and then
they got out and came back in.
Yeah, exactly. And so
there was,
I think for them though, it was important, like, because like when you get an engine, and I'm sure you already know all this, but when you get a power unit from, if you're a customer team, you kind of have to build your car around whatever they're giving you. So in Aston Martin's case, not only do they get the engine from Mercedes, they also get the rear end and the gearbox and rear suspension components. And so you can't really build it the way your engineers want it to be exactly, and so you're losing performance by doing that. And I think if you're involved with an OEM, or you're involved with an engine manufacturer, and you can keep everything in-house, I think you're going to be that much more competitive eventually, if you start off on the wrong foot or whatever, but you'll still eventually gain that ground back. I just think for these customer teams, and Gunther Steiner doesn't seem to think so, but I think personally for the customer teams, they'd be in a little bit of trouble with this. I mean, if we look at like Williams, if they're still going to get everything from Mercedes, I mean, technically they're not building everything themselves anymore, right?
Yeah, and it's always been that way, that having, if not engine design input, but being able to be that one step ahead in terms of building your car, in partnership with the engine manufacturer instead of getting it off the shelf. It was once possible for a customer team to win a you think of Braun. I think one of the years that Benetton won, with Michael Schumacher. They had Renault engines, I think, and Williams was the Renault Works team at the time. But those were very rare even then. Now you think about how many more things, like you said, not even like getting in the suspension, but you've just got more components to your power unit now than you did when it was just the V10 ICE. And now, there's so many other things that you have to fit in that physical package, and optimizing weight distribution. It's such a huge leg up. And for that reason, we've seen Renault when it struggled to beat first Red Bull and then McLaren when they were using the same power unit recently. Like, you have to really screw things up in order to not beat your customer teams. And so I do think that there's the explicit partnership between Red Bull and AlphaTauri, and the very close technical relationship, like you said, between Williams and Mercedes, and then Ferrari and Haas. And now there's going to be, Aston Martin's going to be a works team, and Audi's going to be a works team. And, I really do think we're going to see two classes of, not like that class stratification didn't already exist, but it's going to get more pronounced, like you said, because even if everybody's spending the same, the amount of flexibility you have as a customer team, you just can't pursue or optimize your design path in the same way you can if you have more information and more detail and more input into the power unit.
Absolutely. Think about if you're McLaren. I mean, it's McLaren.
They're lost in the wilderness. Yeah, like
they're still using Mercedes engines, but like maybe some of their technical leaders don't want the battery to be placed in a certain area, and they need it to be placed in another area, and Mercedes can't accommodate for that because they've got their championship to worry about, and so you then have to design everything around with whatever they're giving you, and so that in itself, you're taking yourself almost out of the game at that point.
McLaren, and all these teams, not just mostly Aston Martin and McLaren have expressed a desire to, get from where they are now to championship contention. And I really do think you will eventually need a works engine deal to get there. And McLaren has, just in terms of that messy Honda divorce, and then how they were left in the wilderness, and the fact that they couldn't come to a deal with Audi, which, if the parameters were Audi needs to take control, I can understand why McLaren wouldn't be interested in that. But they've been left without a chair when the music stopped, and I think they're going to be the big loser unless they can get somebody else to come in and partner with them for, it's probably too late for 26 now.
Getting there, right? I mean, I wonder if a deal with Porsche would be on the table at all, and I'd be interested to know if Zach and McLaren had conversations with Porsche at all. I mean, it'd be fascinating to know, but I mean, you got Ford coming in now, and then I mean, obviously if Andretti gets in, that's your Cadillac GM, but that's more of a branding exercise than it actually is.
It feels like Cadillac stickers on somebody else's engine.
That's what I was thinking too. I was thinking something similar. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I think for Aston Martin getting Honda, I mean, this is just a clear sign that Lawrence Stroll isn't screwing around. I mean, after he took over this team in 2018, I mean, he's changed this whole thing, this whole team, this whole dynamic. If you think of it and you look at them the way they are now, I mean, you've got some very big talent that he's pulled in and hired, that the team has pulled in and hired. You've now got a works deal with an engine manufacturer, which is going to be huge once 2026. You've also got a technical partnership with Aramco, and that collaboration is more in depth than I think people actually know, where Aramco is going to be a big component in terms of the sustainable fuels. And so these are big collaborations, Bauman. I mean, he's really pulled together a huge team here, and it's clear as day. Like, this guy we're gonna win. That's it. That's his mindset.
I think Lawrence Stroll can be a little bit of a Trumpian figure. He comes in with a lot of bluster, and he's like, "Well, I'm rich, so I win at everything, and we're gonna win at everything now." And it's taken a little bit for him to back it up. And now with the, getting Fernando Alonso on board, building a successful car for the first time under Aston Martin, developing a new factory, and now getting that works engine deal for 26, who knows if it's going to work? Like, who knows if they're going to end up with a race-winning car or ever challenge for a championship or where this all ends up. But he's doing all the right things. Like, he's making all the investments that you need to make in order to close that gap. And so, I think I was skeptical on whether he would eventually walk the walk, but this certainly seems to be
anything he's gotten involved.
I don't know what more you could ask from them in terms of investment.
Anything he's ever gotten involved with, he's made it successful, like very successful. And when I found out about this back in 2018 and what he was doing, I'm like, he's going to be successful. There's no question about it. He knows how to do this business, and he's been involved in Formula One like since I was around, like I was like a kid. So this isn't like a new sort of thing for him. He does know the sport inside and out. I think.
Yeah, but how many times have we seen people who have always been successful and have lots of money and come in and talk a big game? That's still no guarantee of success.
Yeah, they're showing it
Which
now,
I
though.
guess it still isn't with Aston Martin. They've still got a long way to go. They've haven't won a race as Aston Martin. So at this point, I would have to believe they will at some point. But
we'll see what happens at the end of this weekend.
Sunday. Yeah.
Because I think, honestly, man, Alonso, I think, wins. That's what I'm going to say it right now. I think Alonso wins.
That would be fun. That would be a lot. That would really be a lot of fun. And I think it would be the perfect narrative capstone to the way the first part of the season has gone. I don't know. I'm just really pessimistic. I just don't think God loves us enough to give us the fun outcome that we deserve. I think it's going to be another Red Bull, probably another Verstappen win.
Well, I think,
and if that happens, at what point do you start rooting for Red Bull to run the table?
Oh yeah, good question, man. I don't know. I still need to even though it's only been 5 rounds. What are we? 5 rounds going into the 6th round here, I think, if my math is correct. I don't know. I could be fucking wrong. But my thing is that we still haven't gotten teams really bringing upgrades to the cars. I mean, this will be for Mercedes their first weekend, and then Ferrari has brought little tiny things with a bigger push coming for Spain. Aston Martin hasn't really brought anything. They brought a tiny bit for this weekend, and that is it. And they'll introduce something a bit bigger the weekend after, I'm sure of it. And so we haven't really seen these teams start to pull back some of that time, right? Like we saw last season where that did happen. You saw teams who went from back of the grid to fighting within the midfield. And so I don't necessarily think Red Bull's just going to run away with this thing. I think if we get to round 10, then that's the point where you're like, hey, can they win it all? Can they win every single race? At that point, then yes, I agree with you at that point.
Okay, because this is one of the few places where I really think that they might not actually have the fastest car. I think they have the fastest car here, but I'm open to the possibility that they don't.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see it this weekend, man. I just really don't.
You don't see Red Bull winning this weekend.
Only because just from what I've seen so far this season, right? We take a look at, if we really want to get nerdy about this, if you just take a look at a single lap pace. I mean, Ferrari still has that, right? And then if you look at Monaco as a track, okay, you can't pass there. There's no passing getting done on Sunday, not unless something massive happens or the rain shows up, right? Then we can probably see some passing. And then on top of all of that, when we're talking about the tires, it's just for Red Bull the way they work within qualifying. They don't really get them activated and warmed up and ready to roll as soon as they get out to quali. And the thing with Monaco on top of that is that the tire's going to be almost junk by the time you get through a second push lap, if that's the direction you want to go in, right? So I just don't I just don't really see it happening for them this weekend. That's not to say that they're not going to be on the podium or competing for a win or all that kind of stuff. I just think there's going to be edges going to some of the other teams, like Ferrari and in particular Aston Martin.
I think all that's absolutely true, but you talk about the strength of Red Bull being in race pace and not in qualifying. They've still been on pole 4 out of 5 races, and the Azerbaijan pole was, in my opinion, way more about Charles Leclerc pulling a rabbit out of his hat than anything, than Ferrari being closer to the pace. Carlos Sainz was almost a second off the pole time in Azerbaijan, and so I agree with everything you said. There are all sorts of small advantages, small things working against Red Bull and Monaco compared to other tracks, but I think their gap to the next best team is so big to begin with that I still, if Leclerc does something incredible and wins, or if this is the time, if the Aston Martin is finally close enough that Alonso can make a difference, one of those two guys winning would not shock me. But I still think Red Bull has to be the favorite just because their advantage is so big. And also, Max Verstappen hasn't really had to sweat even this season. And they still have him. I still think he's not got another gear to go to, just compared to what he's had to do so far this season. So I don't know, short of him getting the red mist and freaking out and taking out Checo, I don't. We'll have to have something weird, I think, in order for Alonso or Leclerc or somebody else to beat the Red Bulls. I think their advantage is so huge right now.
Let's continue with Red Bull, but in particular AlphaTauri.
Yeah.
Nick de Vries. I mean, we've talked about this on we talked about this on SDPN before, even on the socials as well. Yes, and as we understand, Red Bull's Helmut Marko has been growing a bit frustrated with Nick de Vries lately. I can understand why. I mean, he does have a load of experience at F1 experience in particular. Not a load of, but he does have F1 experience. I don't see him as an F1 rookie Bauman like Logan Sargent or Oscar Piastri.
No,
but
it's a different...
Yeah, he did say today, though, that he wasn't shocked. Like de Vries said today, he wasn't shocked by the speculation that he could be replaced at the team. I mean, how much time... Let's just say he's a rookie. How much time do you think, and I'll give you my opinion after, do you think rookies should get in Formula One before, let's say, being replaced or fired?
So, first of all, I don't know if you remember this. This was like 2 years ago. We were potting together and talking about the Alfa Romeo seat that went to Guan Yu Zhou, and I said I wanted to see somebody a little bit more interesting in that seat. Compared to, I think Antonio, we were talking about versus Antonio Giovinazzi. Sort of had his,
that's right.
And I said, Nick de Vries has just won Formula 2. Why doesn't he deserve a chance? And you made a face that indicated, I think it would be too polite to say this out loud, but it indicated a supreme lack of confidence in Nick de Vries' ability to hang in F1 long term. And I was sort of skeptical, and I owe you an apology because early you were very right, because early returns are not positive. And even, it's that car's a dog. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's bad.
And he's in against a teammate who seems to be finally putting things together in Yuki Tsunoda, who's
also
driven
true.
He's been fantastic this season. He's been made to look a little foolish by comparison. And there are, rookie faults. I think Logan Sargent's been guilty of a lot of them this season. But that can be excused by the fact that he's so much younger. And frankly, I don't think he was ready for Formula One. I think in a perfect world, he gets another season in F2 before he makes that jump. I think he's a little bit undercooked, and so compared to de Vries, where you can't really make that comparison. With all that said, the fact that these rumors are circulating 5 races into his first full F1 season, even by Red Bull standards, that's brutal. That's That's rough. And, everybody seems to like Liam Lawson, who's doing really well in Super Formula right now. Everybody wants to see Daniel Ricciardo back on the grid. Man, I think it's too early to just... Yeah, I'll put it this way. I think based on the performance this season, you can be very pessimistic about the long-term potential of Nick DeVries to be maybe, let's say, a consistent point scorer in Formula One. I think we've seen a lot of evidence, and not a lot of it flatters him. But just in terms of not being rash, not making snap decisions, based on emotion, I think a rookie like him in his situation deserves the full season, barring some catastrophe. If he's not as bad as Nikita Mazepin was a couple years ago. And that's the level of performance that I think would warrant bidding off a rookie a third of the way into his first season. So I'm not holding my breath for him to show huge improvement. And if I were a betting man, I would probably say that, somebody like Liam Lawson is probably in that seat next year, but it's too early to write him off completely now. I think he deserves more of a chance than he's gotten.
I agree. I think he deserves a season for sure. They haven't even brought upgrades to the Alpha Tower yet. I mean, I think they're going to be having a new floor on this car soon as well anyways, and that may change some things for Nick. At the same point, Yuki's also performing very well, obviously. Yeah, and it's great. It's great to see. I mean, obviously fighting for his seat in Formula One at the same time, and he's doing really well. And the thing with Nick is that he just does have... He's not your... I already kind of said it, but he's just not your normal rookie, right? He's not. He's having way more experience than most rookies have when they come into Formula One. And that's why I was a little shocked to see how he's
2.5 years older than Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
He's 2.5 years older than Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, drivers are drivers at the end of the day, right? I think you're either going to get it or you're not. And I think for Nick, I think it's just going to take a little bit more time, and then we'll really start to see what we have here. I think going to tracks that you don't know, that is really against you as a rookie. I mean, for Nick, he's gone to a lot of tracks right now that he doesn't know, and so the next round of racetracks coming up, he's going to know them a little bit better. Maybe not Canada, but he knows Monaco, he knows Spain. We'll get a better understanding of what's going on there. In terms of a rookie, so if I just look at Logan Sargent, Oscar Piastri, I don't think for them it's 1 year and you're gone. I think for newer rookies who are coming up from Formula 2 and they don't have at all any F1 experience, I think for them it just takes a lot longer, as we've seen in the past. It's not 1 year, it's 2, maybe 3 for some. And so that's why it's kind of I look at Logan and I see there's a lot of potential, and he's extremely fast, he's extremely talented, and I think it just needs a couple things to go his way and for him to start figuring out a few things here and there, and I think he's going to be fine. The only the only worrying thing that I saw was Miami, and just the lap delta between Alex and Logan in Miami, where Australia was a little bit different. Saudi Arabia, Logan was really strong there, and that's a track that's as a rookie in a Formula One car, man, it's the circuit I would least want to drive. Yeah,
out of everything that's on the calendar this year.
And he did really well. And so I think Monaco is going to be a little bit different, but I think as the season rolls along, I'm not too worried about Logan. I really am not just yet. I mean, I haven't seen enough at the same time, but I'm not too concerned about it.
And he and Piastri are also the fact that they're in their early 20s, the fact that both of them have been picked up by, F1 teams saw fit to really invest in them as juniors, and they've been brought in, both of them, with the implicit understanding it's not entirely about this year. I think maybe not Piastri, but I think Sargent, there is a floor of performance that he could hit where he drives his way out of a seat. But I don't think he's there. I don't think he's trending that way. But I think both Williams with Sargent and McLaren with Piastri have a lot of incentive to be patient with those guys.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
In a way that AlphaTauri, like, Nick de Vries was, like, their fourth choice. You know, and he's basically a mid-career driver who had little or no connection to the team beforehand. Like, he's a hired hand. He's there doing a job. And I think it's different when, you know, you certainly look at McLaren and Piastri and what McLaren, the lengths that they went to get him in the team, and then Williams, you know, promoting Sargent from their young driver program. Like, those guys are part of the family, and I think it's different in terms of the standards that they're held to right off the bat.
Valtteri Bottas. This was one of the cooler stories that kind of came out for Media Day. I actually really enjoyed this one. And I texted you about it like immediately when I found out. So let's take everyone through the story here. So, you know, Valtteri was due to drive to Imola for the Grand Prix, but once it got canceled, he didn't have anything to do. So his girlfriend, Tiffany Cromwell, she's a professional cyclist, and she was in Scotland competing in a gravel cycling race. So it was like a World Series, a World Championship event. So some big-time cyclists, intra-athletes actually, were competing in this thing. So Bottas was able to get himself a spot in the event. He was able to get himself a spot. So, like, right away, like, you got to be pretty confident with your fitness. And I'm a big triathlete guy. Like, I'm training for one that's going to happen here in August. And, like, I used to compete in a lot of Ironman, half Ironman, tried to get my pro card at one point when I was driving race cars. I was using triathlon to train and get in shape. So I understand. I've trained with a lot of pros. And so I understand, like, the level of, like, fitness that these pros have. Bottas gets himself a spot in this cycling event, and Olympic triathlete Alistair Brownlee was in the event, and this guy's, like, very fast. Like, Brownlee's resume, he's, two-time gold medal winner in the Olympic distance, ITU world champion, ETU championship title.
He's a good enough triathlete. I know who he is.
Yeah, like, silver. Like, he got silver in Ironman 70.3 World Championships in 2018, 2019. Still hasn't done well at the longer distance Ironman distance. But his cycling, right? You have to be a top level cyclist. You've got to be an incredible swimmer, and you got to be an incredible runner. But your cycling has so important because it's a huge weapon in triathlon. And Bottas beats the guy at this World Championship event on the weekend, dude. Like, unbelievable. It just shows you how fit, like, a lot of these drivers are. Yeah. But, dude, I couldn't believe it, man. Like, some people may just sit there and be like, big deal, whatever. I'm like, no, that's
gravel racing is like
deal.
the hot trendy thing in cycling now. You know, a lot of the pros are moonlighting at these races, and you know, just the big one in Kansas, and you know, all over the place. It's turning into like its own little niche event. So, but like hugely impressive to be like any kind of actual endurance athlete in a cycling race is just massive.
Now, like you had like replied back to me, I mean, if this were a triathlon, it would be a different story.
Well, I said if he's good at running and swimming, then he's in business. But
for sure. We have some questions on Twitter. We'll run through them.
Is it Bottas's ex-wife an Olympic swimmer?
Yeah, I think she was. I'm not sure if she still is, but yes, I believe she was an Olympic swimmer. Yes, so crazy, man. Let's see.
His next partner is going to be a marathoner by.
From Jesse Blake.
Moving on.
Yes, are the Mercedes upgrades overhyped, or could they really challenge Red Bull? Great question. Too early to tell. And I don't think so. It's sort of a two-part answer there for you, Jesse.
I don't know if they're overhyped, because I don't know if anybody reasonably expects them to really close that gap all at once. And I don't think it's about closing the gap this year. I think it's about proof of concept for the direction that they're going to go in next. Yeah. And so, you know, how useful they're going to end up being, I think, will be partially about the lap time, but also what they learn about the aerodynamics and what the 24 car is going to eventually end up looking like.
From Patridge Sherman. Which team or driver from the bottom 5 has the best chance to steal some points in Monaco? I'm going to say not
Williams. McLaren, right? You're all down.
Well, okay, actually, you know what? I like McLaren.
McLaren's technically not in the bottom 5 anymore. They're ahead of Alpine on countback now.
Yeah, countback. That's right. I'm gonna say either McLaren or Williams are in line for some points here. What do you think?
I could see that. Give me like a huge Hulk qualifying lap.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hanging on by the ragged edge, coming in 6th or 7th or something.
Yep. Yeah, okay. I'm with that too. From Stephen Clary, top picks for the Indy 500. Do we get a winner from the top 12 as usual, or do we see a midfield challenger with how quick the entire field was during qualifying and arguably the fastest field we've seen yet? Yes, the qualifying for IndyCar, the Indy 500, was incredible last weekend. If you didn't see it,
the numbers are nuts. I was seeing like the bump day numbers. It was like 2:29. I was like, oh, that's about how fast everybody's going. And like the pole time was what, like 2:34 and change?
Yeah, something like that. I want to say 2:30.2 or something like that, if I remember correctly by Palou. But dude, these guys are flying this year. But again, then you have your qualifying trim and you have your race trim, so they are a little bit different. Speeds aren't going to be, it's more along the lines of like how good of a race car do you have? And I think Pato O'Ward or someone from the Aero McLaren team is going to be the driver who wins the Indy 500.
The McLarens have been
awesome,
incredibly fast. I know. Yeah, I know, like, Alex Palou's been quick. I think, you can't really ever count out Scott Dixon, but I think you're right. I think, like, the McLaren's been so impressive. They had a really good performance as a team on the road course. Pato almost won. Was it last year or the year before that? Where he
last year, yeah.
Last year, yeah. Him and going up against Marcus Ericsson.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think Pato's a good call. If I had to pick somebody else, I don't know, Alex Rossi in another McLaren, I guess, if I had to go with somebody else. But, yeah, I think it would make sense for Pato to be probably the favorite.
Alex Rossi grabbing his second IndyCar, Indy 500 win from Nick Ignatov. Do you think the lack of tunnel time will affect Red Bull as early as this year in terms of teams catching up to them, or will it not make a difference until next year? That's a good question. We were literally just talking about that on the show.
Yeah.
Hey, honestly, I don't think it's going to affect them until next season, just considering how competitive this car has been straight out of the gate. And I think once we get to next season, then we'll have a better understanding how this sporting penalty affected them. That's what I think.
I've been really interested and I guess we'll never really know with any kind of precision how much they've decided, like how they decide to allot that time, because they're in a hole in terms of development anyway, just because they won the Constructors' Championship last year. And taking this further hit, I think what I was sort of hoping for was somebody would challenge them this year and force them to continue to develop to the end. I mean, I guess we'll get through this first round or two of upgrades and see where things shake out, but I think I've joked about Red Bull running the table. I think the thing that will probably prevent them from doing that is they have a stronger incentive than any team has ever had to shift focus to the forthcoming season as soon as possible. So I think like it's possible they could end up building up such a huge lead in the first half of the year that they can weather that penalty really without skipping a beat. I think that's what I would expect to happen at this point.
This one's for you, Bauman, from Jim at Hockey in Ottawa. Is this the year Charles Leclerc breaks his Monaco curse?
He started the question, is this the year Charles Leclerc breaks? And yes.
There you go. He's gonna break the Monaco curse. From Richard Murcia. Whoa, this is a big one. Does Honda working with Aston Martin make sense from a PR perspective? Yes.
Aston Martin doesn't make its own engines, right? They buy, for the road cars, they buy like
So AMG, well, yeah, I think like
Mercedes,
part of their thing for Aston Martin, the road cars, and they've been doing this for actually quite a while. I think AMG builds the V8s, and then I think the V12 that was used in the Valkyrie, that I think was made from Cosworth. But for most of their cars, yeah, I think Mercedes AMG does their engines. And the question kind of continues. I looked at a news article in 2021 about Red Bull. Honda hardly ever gets mentioned in them. If Red Bull pushes Honda away, won't a strong brand like Aston Martin do this as well and even take away credit from Honda? While, in fact, Aston Martin has zero engineering influence as a sponsor.
I don't really agree with the premise of the question. I don't think Red Bull really pushed Honda away. It feels like they were... Yeah.
Well, remember they got their first win with Red Bull. I mean, Verstappen was literally on the podium. He held out his suit and like literally was pointing at the Honda emblem for the entire shoot.
That was such a huge deal for them. Yeah.
Oh, it was massive. Yeah, and they brought up Honda personnel and
PR perspective, I think the real thing, like Honda with like, I was going to say an all-time bag fumbling in terms of when they decided to quit F1 after 2021, but it's not even the worst timed F1 exit they've made in the 21st century. So it's a crowded field. But in terms of like how much PR mileage they got out of Max Verstappen, and like, you know, they were comparing the Honda Verstappen relationship to the Honda Ayrton Senna relationship. Like I think that was a very, very successful commercial partnership. And in terms of like how it works with Aston Martin, I think it's maybe there's a little bit of branding congruity with a very like old money European sports car brand working with a Japanese engine manufacturer. But like a lot of those boutique sports car companies, you know, they, like we were talking about, like buy engines off the shelf or work with more specialized companies to get the power plant, and the car manufacturer just builds like the chassis and you know, the bodywork and stuff. And so I don't think that there's a little bit of branding congruity in terms of what you think of with Aston Martin and Honda, but you overcome that with a TV commercial, or you overcome that with, you know, picture of Fernando Alonso if he's still around, like, you know, like you said, pointing to the Honda stitching on his coveralls after a win. So I don't think that's a big issue. And
I mean, Verstappen actually talked about it today, Thursday, at during Media Day, where he's upset that Honda is not going to be a part of Red Bull moving forward. I mean, obviously they're getting Ford coming in for 2026, but at the same time, you know, you made a great point at the relationship, you know, Verstappen had or has with Honda. I mean, that's a great point that you make. Thanks everyone for your Twitter questions. We really appreciate it. Bauman, this has been fun, like always, man. Let everybody know what you got going on and where they can find your stuff.
Well, you can find me at fangraphs.com. If you are a regular reader of intelligent baseball commentary and also my stuff, I would urge you to consider purchasing a membership where you get all sorts of cool perks and ad-free browsing and stuff. I've also got a freelance piece up recently at Sports Illustrated about the Michigan move. So I dipped my toe into the world of hockey and talked to Philip Forsberg and Logan Cooley and some of the guys, you know, creative younger hockey players who are pushing the physical boundaries of the sport. So that's up at Sports Illustrated. I would encourage you to go check that out as well. And follow me on Twitter at Michael Bauman.
That's awesome. Thanks very much, man, for coming on. Really appreciate it. You've been listening to Nailing the Apex. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts. Write a review. Let us know how we're doing, because honestly, it really helps us a lot. You can follow me on social media at Tim Harani, and we'll talk to you all later.